CMMS Radio talks about all things CMMS, computerized maintenance management software, focused on maintenance management. It's the people, the process, and the culture that make your CMMS journey a success. All right, everybody, we are back. We're here with Joe Anderson, and I love talking to Joe about stuff because we can just rip. We don't have to screw around with any pre-questions or any of that kind of stuff. And anybody that knows me, I much prefer that. And it's not just because I like winging it. It's because it's the only way to be real about stuff. It's not contrived. And I've always wanted to help the industry. Sure, CMMS, very important to me, but there's so much more connected to that. And one of the things I want to talk to Joe about today is really around maintenance, but we're going to get into some other stuff. So first of all, Joe Anderson, welcome back to CMMS Radio.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it. It's always a great time, Greg. Thank you.
Yeah, I've talked to so many people about the visits we've had, like when we were at Reliable Plant Conference last year, and I think you're going this year, but some of the talks that we have that aren't recorded, man, oh my God, there's just so much goodness there as far as what you can do with it. And people that might not understand that, what I'm talking about is we strip out all the BS and we just talk about stuff. And I love the idea that you can go to someone and they can kind of instantly become a mentor. They can tell you, hey man, there's a pothole over there. Don't step in that. Or they see you step in the pothole and fall down, and they're like, nah, that's not a thing, man. Get up. Come on, let's go. I just love that stuff. And I don't have to worry about, oh, somebody's going to listen to this, somebody's watching. I don't have to care about that. So I really enjoy you making the time to do this, but I love those conversations. So
I enjoy them too, man. Deep conversation is something that, a lot of us don't have because everything is so superficial and shallow. And like, to me, I don't know, maybe that's the introvert in me. I just don't find value in small talk and that type of conversation. Like, if I can't have a deep conversation, I really don't want to talk at all. I'd just rather sit and be quiet. So I don't know, man. That's definitely a strength and a weakness at the same time. But
aren't
no,
they
I
all?
appreciate our conversations, man.
Yeah, me too, man. Look, my favorite thing to do is talk about things, and something about it, I don't even know how to articulate it, but it's just good shit. And that's all that really matters. And for anybody that doesn't really get that, I'm saying I invite you to try to get it, because if you think about things a bit more deeply and, get below the surface, beyond the surface, however you want to put that, there's good stuff there in essentially any conversation that goes on a journey. And I love that, because we're all on a journey and it's not kumbaya. We can be real about stuff. We can say, oh yeah, that sucks. That's a bunch of crap. But that's why I wanted to do this today. And the first thing I want to talk to you about, if we're talking real, I did a post not too long ago, and I was kind of putting it out there saying, hey, define maintenance. And you and I have talked about that before, but I want to do it here as if we haven't. And I kind of want to have you define maintenance and then include what is it and what is not maintenance.
Yeah. So if we're talking in the context of doing maintenance, right, as we normally do in the industry, quite simply, it's defined as the act of maintaining, right? But we have to break down the root word maintain. What does maintain mean? Maintain means to guard or protect or to keep at base condition. So what that means is that once defects enter a machine, it is no longer maintainable. It hasn't been maintained, right? Which requires you then to go out and do repairs. And we do a lot of repairing in the industry, and we call it maintenance because of this umbrella term that we've been sold, right? But repairing isn't maintenance. You wouldn't be repairing if the asset was maintained. Now, there's nuances to that, right? There's certain repairs that have to take place in order to keep a machine maintained. But you're doing that in a planned downtime situation, right? Not unplanned. And what we find is the majority of the industry all over the world is reactive. And maintenance, by its own definition, denotes proactivity. So if you're reactive, you're not doing maintenance by its own definition, right? And
Yeah.
so um, now the confusion comes in because we're called the maintenance department. And so anything under the umbrella of maintenance department, we call it doing maintenance, right? We just don't take the time to actually think about what it is we're saying and how to delineate the terms so we can understand the difference between the two.
So
And that's kind of the big problem, right? It's kind of like um, the quality group in your facility. It's not quality group that denotes the quality of your product. It's operations. They're the ones out there making the product and ensuring its quality, right? But we'll associate those things with the quality department because quality is in the name of the department, right? And so that creates a lot of muddy waters, but I think a lot of times it's just that we're not really thinking through what it is we're talking about. The quality department is there to ensure checks and balances are in place to ensure that operations is putting out a quality product,
right.
right? And so it's like saying operations shouldn't do any maintenance. That isn't true. If they're not cleaning a machine, cleaning leads to minor stops lead to breakdowns, right? So picture if there's glue all over a box machine and now the box jams. When that box jams, we don't understand the torsion and the tension and stuff that we're putting on all the bearings, all the rods, all the shafts, right? And it does that 600 times a week. Eventually, you're going to end up having a breakdown, all because we didn't keep the glue off of the box machine,
Is there
right?
a is there kind of a general reason? I mean, it's not like you're inside anybody's head and you can read their mind, but as to why that's maybe
It's
common
the
with
same thing,
operators?
right? Is they associate doing maintenance tasks with the job of a maintenance mechanic,
Mm,
which it isn't true. Like it's like being an owner of a vehicle. As the owner operator, if you read your manual, you're required to do a certain level of maintenance to your vehicle, right?
mhm.
When the car breaks, that's when you call the mechanic. Running equipment is the same. There's a certain level of maintenance that's required by you as an operator. And then when it no working no more, you have to call the maintenance mechanic, right? To do a repair. So what they do is we've gotten to this point in the industry where we want operations just to be a bunch of button pushers and we want the 10 guys that we have in maintenance to do all the other work. So what we've done is pawned off a lot of the work. Let's say the facility has 300 operators and there's 30 maintenance guys,
Mhm.
right? We've pawned off the work of 300 operators onto a group of 30. Plus, they still are somehow, somewhere supposed to execute their strategy and do all their other work. And that's because we superficially denote everything under the maintenance umbrella because it has the term maintenance in it.
Yeah, it feels like like it's lazy, languid. We
It
just start
is, but
lumping things
that's what
together.
we do is we're at this point where um, nobody wants to do the work, but everybody wants the results. And so it's really easy to make maintenance a scapegoat. Now, that's not to say maintenance doesn't have their own flaws,
Right.
right? It's like there's a lot of gaps in maintenance for sure. But it's really easy to make maintenance the excuse as to why you're not hitting your numbers and you're not doing this and that, right?
Yeah.
And so
W-
instead of being a problem solver, um, we have a lot of problem tellers today, not a lot of problem solvers. And so everybody can point the finger and tell you what the problem is, but no one wants to do the work to actually fix it.
That's the blame game, right?
It's a blame game. And that's how we get into the vicious cycle that we're in. Is it starts with that, because maintenance blames engineering and blames operations. Engineering blames maintenance and operations. Operations blames engineering and maintenance. And it's just this circle of, viciousness that keeps us in the reactive culture that we're seeing today.
Do you think it's there's actual awareness about it, but then a refusal, kind of like you say, when it comes to executing and finding a way to solve it? Why do you think everybody, I don't know who I'm talking about here, but it's like somebody somewhere or a bunch of people have given up, but they know that's a thing. And it's almost like when we see degrading infrastructure across the United States of America, like it's not like nobody knew. They're just like, oh man, we put that off way too long. So when it comes to fixing these
Well,
aspects
everybody's
of,
waiting on somebody else to do it.
so it's a psychological phenomena,
We all know that X, Y, and Z exists, but who's doing something about it? At the same time, we all have onus in it. Every one of us have onus in a lot of things.
right?
Even the infrastructure, because a lot of that is politics, and none of us really do our due diligence to understand the level of involvement we should have as citizens within politics. We just let everybody else do it. My job's just to vote for you. It's like, part of the reason why we're in this situation is because of uninformed people.
Right.
And that's a responsibility of the American citizen. And it's no different in business. It's the same thing. What you see on a macro scale in this country, you're seeing in a micro scale in business.
Right.
It's the same thing. Is there's people that are aware of problems, but one, they don't know how to solution them. And that's, of course, one of the bigger problems. But you've got people that think it's everybody else's job to do something when we're all responsible. That's why reliability is so important. Reliability is holistic. It's not the job of maintenance. We've done this, and it's no fault of anybody. It's just that over time, reliability has become synonymous with maintenance.
Th-
And that's the furthest thing from the truth.
So a question on that, because like I'm really wanting to know from you, where do they intersect? Does one live inside the other? Do they run
Yes.
adjacent? Do they compete?
Everything lives inside of reliability.
Ah,
Everything. Let me ask you a question. If 5 senior leaders are sitting in a room and they make a decision, and that decision has a terrible outcome, right? Is that affecting your plant reliability? So, for example, let's say they decide we're going to cut 52 headcount out of a plant, right? And a portion of that is maintenance, a portion of that is operations, a portion of that is logistics, right? And then their numbers plummet, right? Did that or did that not affect the reliability of the plant?
it negatively impacted it.
Right. It's unreliability,
Yeah.
right? And so those decisions affect reliability. The way operations operates equipment, runs their processes, all of that affects reliability. The way logistics does their work and meets on-time delivery and all those types of things, that affects the reliability. So it's reliability not only of equipment but of the organization.
Thus, the holistic approach is the only way.
Well, yeah, I mean, you know, if we're only talking equipment reliability, Management still has a piece. Quality has a piece. Operations has a piece. Maintenance has a piece. Reliability is this big umbrella, and everybody owns a piece of it. Ultimately, what we're all trying to achieve is better reliability, for the plant, for the facility, whatever it is we're taking care of. But
Yeah.
it requires everyone. What we do is, like all things, is maintenance ends up becoming a scapegoat.
Easy target.
Well, and we're not good at defending ourselves. Instead, what we do is we do fire breathing back and blame this and blame that, because we don't truly understand what our own function is within that umbrella.
It also creates a threat for different levels of leadership, let's say supervisors, managers, and you keep going up that food chain when you've actually got a grasp on something and you're presenting a solution, maybe in a non-fire breathing way,
Mhm.
but they have to worry about protecting their job and their role because they're afraid to empower you. Does that happen a lot?
All the time. You create enemies you don't even know you have, and it works against you, right? That's a part of being a change agent,
Mm,
right? If you're a change agent within a facility, you're going to create a lot of enemies, and a lot of them you're not even going to know you have, and you're not doing it on purpose.
right.
What you're doing is trying to look out for the best interest of the facility of the company. The problem is, I'll give you an example from my own career.
Okay.
There was a gentleman at the corporate level. I didn't even know him, right? Didn't know him, didn't know he existed. I was just a maintenance manager. But I got on a call because people were asking me what it is I was doing differently because I was getting really good results. And I shared with them what the focus and strategy should be and all this stuff. But it was all counterintuitive to this senior manager that sold the organization to bring in, and I'm a consultant, right? But to bring in consultants and this big project and this initiative and blah, blah, blah. But it was counterintuitive to what he sold the organization. And because I was seeing results, it made him look incompetent, at least in his own mind. And so, I found this out later through talking to some higher ups that I knew really well. But he was bad mouthing me and my initiatives to everybody at the top. I don't have a seat at the top to defend myself. I didn't even know this was going on. And so, it makes you um, unpromotable when people are going around backstabbing you and you don't even know it's happening.
Right.
And you're creating enemies because this guy who was incompetent, right, and sold the organization on all the wrong things, saw me as a threat because what I achieved was great. And it was counterintuitive to what he sold the organization, right? And so
Hmm. Hmm.
you will create enemies. I mean, it just happens. But I don't know. My philosophy is if you're in business to make friends, then you need to sell ice cream or get a puppy.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
it's, if you can't handle the smoke, then stay mediocre, because you're gonna have to take the smoke. It's just, it's a matter of fact.
Hey, I'll tell you, man, I've gotten hung up on a lot of bullshit throughout my career, stuff that when I look back, I'm like, man, that didn't even matter. Do people get hung up on like nonsense and things that don't matter? And I think we could
I
throw
think
in
we
there.
all do that as humans. It's human nature, right? Is the path to success isn't, a vertical line. It's peaks and valleys, and we stunt our own growth at times, and but the real failure in life is if we never move in the first place, right? Like
Yeah.
if we're moving, which most of us do, it's always going to be peaks and valleys. And so that in of itself is success. Just getting up every day and continuing the grind, that's success. The problem is we especially in this country, have defined success by money, possessions, all material things. And that isn't success, not in my eyes. You know what I mean? Like, those things come as a result of execution. But,
We were talking
success,
about that when it comes to, whether it's maintenance or anything else, knowledge. What good is it if you're not executing?
right? Yeah. So, like I said earlier, people say knowledge is power, and I think that's false. I really believe that's false. Having knowledge doesn't, it's like the potential to power, but if you never act on it, what power is there in that, right? The truth is when you execute on the knowledge that you gain, especially new knowledge as you're learning and growing, right? You execute on it. That denotes growth, and coming out of the back end, it gives you wisdom because you've had the courage to overcome your fear, go out and try some things, make mistakes. This is how we learn,
Mm-hmm.
whether we like it or not. The problem is people are so consumed with the fear of making a mistake, it keeps them from moving at all. That's failure, right?
Yeah.
Going out, making the mistakes, learning what to do, what not to do, coming out of the backside of that, you gain wisdom. That's where the power is through execution. And then in the end, gaining that wisdom, right? And understanding. It's simple analogy people use all the time, but like touching the stove, right?
Yeah.
They tell you, don't touch the stove, don't touch the stove. It's hot, it's hot. You're like, yeah, whatever, And so one of two things happen. The fear of not touching the stove keeps you from touching the stove, or your curiosity, you touch the stove. You touch the stove, you made a mistake, but at least you had the guts to move and overcome the fear, which is courage, right? But now you know. And no matter what, no one will ever change the fact that that stove was hot and it burnt your hand, right? And so if you do it again, that's where the problem lies. If you make the same mistake twice, you didn't learn the first time. Maybe you were given a second chance. Or maybe you continually see the same obstacle over and over again because you're not passing the test.
What should someone do with that? If let's pretend it's in a maintenance
Well,
environment and they keep having the same problem over and over.
well, your solution isn't working. This is where self-awareness comes in. When you lack self-awareness, this is why you keep running into the same problem because you think the same solution is going to work. That's insanity. You got to try something different. Maybe it requires you to reach out for help. And this is where a lot of people struggle. I don't want help because it'll make me seem incompetent. But let me tell you, I wouldn't be where I am today if I never asked for help. Because of that help, I am where I am today.
Yeah.
It's the opposite of what we think in our own heads. Somebody comes along, offers some advice, wants to help you out, and you take the advice and go with it, right?
Yeah.
Is a lot different than you not even reaching out because now you're going to get stuck.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And
the more
they're
people you talk to about it, the more people that are willing to help you out, the more likely there is a solution. The thing is we think because we don't know that there's a solution that it's not possible, right? Because we don't know the solution.
yeah.
But if there was 1,000 of us in a room, I'm sure together we could come up with the solution. Just because you think there's not one doesn't mean that there's not. And that's where we get stuck. And we don't want to ask for help and all this because in our own heads, we're saying, well, if I ask for help, I'm incompetent or I don't know what I'm doing. That's the furthest thing from the truth.
Well, if you're if you're asking for help and you're willing to take that help and do something with it, that's actually that's the way forward. It's like we've heard this countless times. There's no such thing as a dumb question. Now, obviously, there's some questions that are pretty stupid or dumb if we want to, kind of call it like it is. But why not ask and take that chance that somebody might chuckle a little bit, but ask it anyway. You'll get it out of the way, and now you're on to the next thing, and you're moving, because stuckness is all about moving forward and bringing it back to maintenance. We want maintenance operations that are moving well, but none of this stuff is hit it and forget it. None of this stuff is, I did that, I'll never ever have to do that again. And I think that's another thing where people fool themselves. They do it with technology. You and I have talked about magic silver bullets and unicorns and all that stuff. And
Yeah.
I think people want that because they're so overwhelmed and busy and they don't know how to move forward. So they just do stuff.
Well, the question is are we focusing on the right things? Because I've said this a million times, but it's about effectiveness, not about efficiency. And people don't quite grasp that. So let me define that for you. Effectiveness, by definition, is doing the right things. Okay. Efficiency, by definition, doesn't have the word right in it. It just means to basically streamline a process with minimal to no waste, right? That's efficiency. It's basically an optimization, if you want to call it that. The problem in industry is we do a lot of the wrong things, but then we look to see how we can make it more efficient. Why would you want to make doing the wrong work more efficient? Well, we're not even questioning if the work we're doing is the right work. Like, why is it such a struggle to get somebody to use a torque wrench? That's the right thing. Nobody's doing it, right? I don't want to say nobody. People are, but the vast majority are not. But at the same time, I ask this question all the time. A lot of maintenance mechanics work on their own cars.
Right.
When they're working on their own cars, they'll use a torque wrench. And it'll be a 1994 beater Honda Accord, and they're using a torque wrench.
Yeah.
But on a $250,000 asset that they're out working on every day, they won't use a torque wrench. So the question is using a torque wrench the right work? Yes. But we're not even doing the right work, but yet we'll look at ways we can we'll look at our PMs and say we need to optimize them. It's like they're not effective in the first place. If you're having downtime, your PMs aren't effective.
Right.
But you're looking to streamline ineffective PMs. Why are you wasting money and time doing that? Why aren't you out doing precision maintenance, using your torque wrenches, torque screwdrivers, all that type of stuff, aligning pumps and doing things that you should be doing the right work? Do the effectiveness pieces first. Do the right work first, then work on making the right things efficient. But we run into this wall all the time because we're not even doing the right work. And we don't even know what the right work is. This is why you have to reach out and get help. You know, my background, I started in beef packing plants. This is no joke, okay? In Southwest Kansas. I grew up in Southwest Kansas, right? We talk about skilled trades gaps a lot, and it's understandable. But to become a mechanic in a beef packing plant, you don't really need to know anything, right? They bring you in and they just say, hey, here's how you change broken interlocks and interlock conveyor. This is how you change a saw blade. This is how you know what I mean? Very basic stuff. And now you're a mechanic. And so all you know is whatever it is you were taught and you were told to do, and you continue to do it over and over again, right? And if that's all you know, you're going to struggle when you hit a roadblock because you don't have the experience to look at things differently or to even question whether the work you're doing is the right work. And so it requires intervention. But that means you have to reach out to seek help. And a lot of people won't do that. Like their own ego gets in the way, and they start, it's the inner battle inside yourself. We all do it, and because we don't want to look incompetent or whatever. I get it, right? But there's no, I mean, there's a lot of skillful guys in a beef packing plant. Trust me. Your ammonia refrigeration guys are phenomenal. Electricians, scale techs are good. But a basic mechanic is changing broken interlocks, changing the realization hit me when I left from doing that to going into a plant that's multi-craft. What I mean by that, the beef packing plants that I worked at had between 3,000 to 4,000 employees. They were large facilities. And I was technically deemed a maintenance mechanic because I could change out broken modules on the interlock conveyor.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Like, and change a bandsaw blade. Like that was my, you know what I mean? And because they're so big, they're departmentalized. Ammonia refrigeration was its own department. Electrician scale techs were their own department. Like when you go into a multi-craft facility, now you need to be a jack of all trades. You need to know electrical. You might need to know ammonia. You might need to know, right? A little bit of everything. I go into a facility like that, and it was a culture shock. I'm like, what? Like, I don't know any of this stuff. And
Yeah.
I'm calling myself a maintenance mechanic. Like, you know what I mean? And, but I had enough self awareness that I realized I needed to educate myself. So I sought help. I went and started attending, trade school classes and doing stuff myself, paying out of pocket myself to take a VFD course, take a PLC course, take a, motor controls course, and start learning electricity. I was certified in ammonia refrigeration. Like I went and did all that stuff, right? Because I realized that I didn't have the skill set necessary. But again, if I got stuck in my own head, not looking for outside intervention, right, I would probably still be stuck in that job doing that job,
Yeah.
right, and not growing and becoming, what I am today, which isn't much, but we're here, right?
Well, plus it's a really good story because it showcases why there's so much upside and value into taking a perspective of like self agency and instead of just allowing for accepting that you're stuck, you're like, well, wait a minute, there's a solution to this problem, and it's good that you're a problem solver and that you're interested in wrestling those things down, because a lot of people would maybe try to find a way to coast through that situation and they wouldn't really get anywhere. They wouldn't be adding any value. And I'm always talking about that because I learn it from you. I learn it from Bryant Bieski. I learn it from so many like real deal practitioners, people that have been in the trenches. And I think it really matters. And so many seem to either neglect it, willfully ignore it. That stuff doesn't really matter. All that matters is the balance sheet. And I'm like, look, I mean, I'm no expert, but I get it. We're in business to make money, but the things and the people have to be kind of moving in the right way. And then they also have to know that, if something happens over here and I'm not that guy and I know it, I should be able to say, hey, that I'm out of my depth. We got anybody over here that knows this, or this? Nope. Yeah, but I know a guy. And let's get on that. Let's
It's
handle it and
funny
not be
though you
stuck.
mentioned the balance sheet, right?
Yeah.
Because they think being reactive helps profitability.
It's the opposite.
It is, and it's so simple that it's almost I don't know. It's, I guess, profound and not profound at the same time. How simplistic it is, like to turn around the maintenance department and do the right things. And in doing so, eliminating downtime, which means you produce more in the same time period, right? Which means your profitability goes up.
It's it's
And yeah, it's
the
funny though, because that is true what you said. People say that all the time, but it's because of their own lack of understanding, right?
yeah,
And that comes with, again, implementation of knowledge and or even seeking knowledge in order to execute against it.
yeah,
And a lot of us are so caught up, and it's life too, right? I mean, life gets in the way. We're consumed. We go into work and we're thinking about, well, especially maintenance guys, a lot of them are going through divorces, a lot of them, all this stuff, like their heads not in it because they've sacrificed themselves for the betterment of this company, and in turn, and a lot of times have sacrificed their own families,
yeah.
right? Because they're not home working overtime. We're so reactive. I've got to be here Saturday. I got to be here Sunday. I got to work 12 hours a day. I got to,
Well,
um,
even today's, I mean, it's a sad example, but today there's a lot of people across this nation that they're very distracted right now based on the events of yesterday, and
yeah,
I won't say any other stuff about that, but um, anybody can kind of figure it out, and the challenge. I think about this. There's a job to be done that must be done, but we're people, and there's a lot
mhm,
of things happening that can take us in different directions necessarily, and I always wonder, how can we have an allowance for that, and as say employees and even owners of organizations, how do we allow for life when it disrupts what we're doing to chase the almighty dollar? And there's not much in place when it comes to contingency, succession plans, or anything like that. Hey, how can we hey, we got an emergency here, some people are going to be unable to work today. Oh my god, that's so critical. Well, we've got a skeleton crew that we can operate, and somebody's pencil whipping, no, we can't afford that. And it's like, wait a minute, it's a day, let's look at the big picture. So
yeah.
sometimes I think, and I don't know if I'm right about
Well, a
this.
lot of it too, though, is it's a deeper conversation
Uh-huh.
because there's a lot of um, one of the big things is if we learned how to spend our money correctly, we wouldn't put ourselves in those situations. And instead of taking ownership of our own life and the way that, because we're so materialistic, we want everything that everybody else has so we can ever afford to live because we've got to work to try to make money instead of living within our means. We blame everybody else and everything else. A lot of the guys that I know that worked all that time, they did it because they had to, because of the predicament they were in, not because I was forcing them to. I allowed them to so that they could make money, but I didn't need them to. But a
Mm,
lot of it's because they can't control their own habits. And instead of taking self accountability and, you know, trying to fix those issues,
yeah.
we like to blame everybody and everything else. Now, there are times where you are needed, but those should be the exception and not the rule. The reason you feel forced to work that much is because you're in your own situation. Business owner and blame this guy and blame the billionaires and blame this. It's like you're in that situation yourself, right?
Well,
Like,
this is
for the
interesting.
vast majority, there's always exceptions to the rule, right? But
Yeah.
what we like to do is focus on the exception instead of the rule to make an argument, which is a logical fallacy. The
See
vast
now.
majority of people spend well beyond their means.
Mhm.
Not to say that inflation doesn't affect them and all that type of stuff. I get it. It does.
Right, right.
Right. But when you live in $1 million house on a $50,000 a year salary, like, why? Why do you have 6 SUVs in your driveway? Why? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's this idea of competing with the Joneses, because if we make it look like we have money, we're successful, when most successful people, you don't even know who they are, and they live well below their means, and they have money to go do stuff, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they're not caught up. That's the middle class trap, man.
Oh
And that's
yeah.
what separates wealthy people from not wealthy people, is they don't get caught up in the trap. But that's a whole nother conversation.
Oh, for sure. And
Sorry.
we no, it's okay. Look, the reason I like talking to you about this stuff, whether we're doing an episode or not, is we can get into these things and kind of mm, attempt to wrestle with it, and maybe even less about right or wrong. I mean, even though I think it's
Well, we at least need to have a discussion about it.
yeah, and
But if
keep
you
it
can't even bring up a subject and have a discussion about it, then we squelch innovation, we squelch problem solving and changing our own views when we are wrong about something.
yeah,
Like,
I
if we can't even have the discussion, what's the point?
yeah, and I like to inspire critical thinking, and I like to I mean, sure, I like to be right, but I kind of like to be wrong too, as long as it doesn't hurt too much.
Well, if it's making us all better,
Yeah,
well, what does it matter? Now, at times and I've been known for this in my past. I work on it hard, as being right was the only thing that mattered, and so you would stand on it, even when you're proven wrong. Right? You still stand on it, because that's ego, a lack of humility, a lack of gratefulness, a lack of gratitude, and almost entitlement and victimhood mentality, which uh,
a
is
whole
a
nother
detriment.
episode.
Yeah, but it's a detriment,
Yeah,
right? And our worst enemy is ourself. Until you can conquer self at least a little bit, it's hard to move past that, right?
yeah, yeah. Well, one last thing
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to ask you. There's a lot of people out there that might read the writings and know about a character known as Captain Unreliability, and I want to just ask you, in what way do you see that he is I think Captain Unreliability is quite helpful to teach us lessons on how not to be, while at the same time doing some of the most outrageous things that get our attention because it's such a truism, right? So if I was looking at it from a CMMS perspective, I think Captain Unreliability would say, "Oh, no, you can do that later." He would just defer that, right? Or if there's a
Yeah,
maintenance item, he would say, "Well, I mean, that'll run a little bit longer, man. We'll do that on Thursday. We don't have to do that today."
yeah, the king of procrastination, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that would be awesome. I mean, that always works, right? If
Yeah.
we ignore the problem, it goes away, right? Um,
how should
yeah,
we how should we handle Captain Unreliability when he shows up in our plant, in our facilities, at our rigs, oil rigs, if he's, on the land subdivision and just doing what he does, being as unreliable as anybody could possibly be? How do we handle Captain Unreliability? What do we do if he shows up?
if he shows up, we can fire him. Uh,
Do
you
we help
know,
him? Do we
well, no. I mean, the principle and premise behind Captain Unreliability, well, it's twofold. Personally, um, it's a place I can go to kind of vent, and it's like a therapy session for me,
mm,
to make it comical. Some of the things that you see at times that don't make sense, right?
yeah, yeah.
Um, but in that, there's truths and principles to learn from, and a lot of times it's what not to do, right? So if you see a captain unreliability at your facility, one, understand that you can learn a lot from them and what not to do, right? But two, try to get them off the premise as soon as possible, because the risk to the company is going to be tremendous. But it's I think in life, I reflect back on my career and the bosses I had and the boss I was, you know, as I was growing and things. And um, I realized I learned a lot more from what not to do. Like when I had a bad boss, I'm like, well, I need to ensure that when I run a department, I don't do these things, X, Y, and Z, right? And it made me focus on those areas that were gaps of mine as well. Like I would have probably did the same thing and fallen in the same trap. The great thing is I had this experience that I could learn from and say, okay, I don't like this. I don't want to be that guy. You know what I mean? And help me grow. So I think a lot of the lessons learned throughout my career is was learned from watching other people. And I've heard it quoted before. I'm not sure whose quote it is, but they say that true wisdom is learning from other people's mistakes. And so I always gravitated to that because I realized that if they're making the mistakes for me, I don't have to go through that. Right. And so that just gives me a step up, to go make other mistakes so I can continue to grow in wisdom and knowledge and those types of things. And
Yeah.
so, the great thing about the Captain Unreliability stuff is I think there's truths in it, or it wouldn't be funny, right? Humor always has truth in it.
Mm.
But the principle behind it is, although a lot of us can relate to those situations, what are we going to do to ensure that that doesn't happen?
Yeah.
We're not a laughing stock like a lot of other people, right? So, that's kind of the thing. But
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
it's a good time for me, for
yeah,
sure.
we're going to be talking a lot more about that in the future. And as always, man, it's not just fun for me though. I get to learn, and this might help somebody, might not. Hopefully they'll get some laughs.
Well, I hope
And
so. I hope there's value in it,
I think there
for
is.
sure.
I think
Yeah.
there is. So we're going to wrap this one. Don't go anywhere, but Joe Anderson, ReliabilityX, thank you for being with me again on
I appreciate you
CMMS
having me.
Radio.
Yeah, thank you.
You got it. Did you find this episode helpful? Please send us some feedback, suggest a topic, or ask a question. Reach out to CMMS Radio if you need a co-pilot on your CMMS project. Visit CMMSradio.com and use the What's on Your Mind link. Thank you for tuning in to CMMS Radio, your resource for all things CMMS, from selection to implementation, to help you make better choices, learn from industry experts, and have a successful CMMS journey.